Right. At least 30 countries in the world have reached out to India for hydroxychloroquine. Some call it the miracle drug. Others say that there is no scientific evidence that it actually works, that the evidence is anecdotal. What is your assessment? Does this drug work?
So I think you need to remember, though, the most important thing is that if we do nothing, in general, 98% of the people with COVID-19 infection eventually recover. So the key to testing all of these drugs, whether it's hydroxychloroquine or remdesivir, which is an antiviral, or testing a vaccine like BCG, is that we really need to do this in a manner that allows us to get answers, because all of the medicines carry some risk of side effects. And, in the case of hydroxychloroquine, there could be cardiac side effects. And if we give it with another drug called azithromycin, which was one of the combinations people had advocated, it can actually potentiate the effect on the heart. So I think, again, I'm a clinical scientist. I'm a person who believes that when we do something, we should do it in order to understand what the mechanism is and whether it's actually working. Because I think governments around the world want people to get better. They want to treat citizens of their own countries that are infected with COVID-19. But I think that all of them know that the most important thing is that the medicines that they give are safe and effective, and that we need to do the kind of studies correctly to be able to tell whether this is true.
Well, some governments also act because they want to be seen to be doing something. A recent study, Dr. Kim, said that lockdowns can only delay the spread of this virus. Yet breaking the chain seems to be the best alternative right now. Countries are extending lockdowns. It all hinges on how quickly we find a cure. So how close, I want to ask you, are we to a cure?
Dr. Fauci has said it'll take 12 to 18 months to the point that we know the vaccine works. And that means that the point where we know that the vaccine prevents infection or disease. And then a part of the government, whatever government it is, the Indian government, the U.S. government, the European Union, has to decide whether, in fact, the trial did what the company or the organization claims that it did, that it prevented infection and disease. That process can take a long time, although because COVID is such an important problem, it can be done in a relatively shorter time, maybe on the order of weeks rather than months. Then we have to make sure that there's a recommendation to use it. So someone has to say, this vaccine works. We're going to use it and recommend that the following people be vaccinated. That usually takes a few months, but again, that can be shortened. And then probably the most important thing, and I think India will be very important in this because India provides a lot of the vaccines for global health. Someone has to make it, and someone has to make a lot of it. I mean, we're talking about 7 billion people in this world. All of them potentially should be vaccinated. So we're going to need billions and billions of doses of vaccine, and we're going to need someone to make it, and we're going to need someone to make it quickly. So as this 12 to 18 months of testing is going on, someone's going to have to think very carefully about how we're going to make as many doses as we can, as quickly as we can, and then someone else, some other group will have to decide, and hopefully this will be decided before we have an effective vaccine. Someone's going to have to decide how we're going to allocate it. How we're going to allocate it fairly, and who needs it first. I mean, in a country like India, who should get the first vaccine? Should it be the doctors and nurses? Should it be the army? Should it be the police force or first responders? Should it be people who work in grocery stores? Because these are all critical parts of how society has to function in the setting of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right, you talked about India's role. India is also supplying life-saving drugs to many countries. In which other ways, Dr. Kim, according to you, can India play a role in this global fight against the coronavirus?
India has a big role to play. I mean, not only because of its population, but we know that India has a very, very important vaccine manufacturing industry. About 70% of the vaccines used around the world for extended immunization programs are made in India. I mean, almost every child in the world has received a vaccine made in India. And that's really important. It means that Indian companies put out 1 billion vaccines a year. And that's the kind of capacity that we're going to need in order to get this vaccine to the people who need it all over the world, not just people in the United States, not just people in Europe, but for people in India, in Africa, in Asia. And so we're going to need companies that have the capacity and know-how to make vaccines. So that's on the manufacturing side. I think one of the things that we may overlook or may be overlooking is, we know that India has great universities and a lot of very talented and intelligent people, a thriving biotech industry, and all of those people, all of those resources could be brought to bear on this, probably the greatest pandemic threat in the last 100 years. And I think India has a lot to contribute.